The bullet grazed her cheek so close that Penelope Winters felt the heat of it before the blood came. And in that single moment, beneath the scorching Dakota sun of 1882, her entire world shattered into fragments she would spend years trying to piece back together. She had been standing at the window of her father's general store in Bismarck, North Dakota, arranging bolts of calico fabric when the robbery began. 3 men burst through the door, their faces covered with bandanas, their revolvers drawn and gleaming. Her father, Samuel Winters, reached for the shotgun he kept beneath the counter. The explosion of gunfire that followed seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Penelope screamed and dove behind a display of canned goods, but not before one of the robbers fired wildly in her direction. The bullet that was meant to kill her merely kissed her face, tearing through the soft skin of her left cheek and jaw, carving a path that would leave her marked forever. Her father was not so fortunate. He died before the sheriff arrived, his blood pooling on the wooden floorboards he had swept clean that very morning. The robbers fled with $73 and left behind a devastated young woman who would never again look at her reflection without flinching. The doctor did what he could, stitching the wound with careful precision, but the damage was too severe. The scar that formed was thick and ropey, stretching from her cheekbone down to her jaw in an angry red line that faded to white over the following months. Penelope was 22 years old, and in her mind, her life was over before it had truly begun. She began covering the left side of her face with her hand whenever anyone approached. She wore her dark hair loose and long, letting it fall forward like a curtain. She tilted her head at specific angles. She avoided mirrors and reflective surfaces. She stopped going to church socials and town gatherings. The store became both her prison and her sanctuary, and she ran it with quiet efficiency, speaking only when necessary, always positioning herself so customers saw only her right profile. The women of Bismarck whispered their pity. The men looked away uncomfortably. Children stared until their mothers pulled them along. Penelope felt every glance like another bullet, carving away at whatever remained of the girl she had been. 2 years passed in this manner. The seasons turned from summer heat to winter blizzards and back again. The town grew as the railroad brought more people west. Penelope Winters remained behind her counter, half hidden, selling flour and sugar and coffee to people who struggled to meet her eyes. It was on a Tuesday morning in late June when Garrett Ellis rode into Bismarck for the first time. He was a cowboy through and through, weathered and lean from years of driving cattle along the trails that stretched from Texas to Montana. His horse was a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, and his belongings were few: a bedroll, saddlebags containing spare clothes and ammunition, and a battered harmonica he played around campfires. He was 26 years old, and he had seen enough of the world to know that surfaces rarely told the truth about what lay beneath. Garrett needed supplies. His trail boss had sent him into town with a list and a purse of coins. The Double E Ranch, where he had just signed on for the summer, was 10 miles south of Bismarck, and the work was hard but honest. He tied Copper to the hitching post outside Winters' general store and stepped inside, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. The store was well organized and clean, with good light coming through the windows. Penelope was behind the counter, her head bent over a ledger, her dark hair falling forward to obscure her face. She did not look up immediately, finishing whatever calculation she was working on before acknowledging him. "Help you?" she asked, her voice low and carefully neutral. "Yes, madam, I have a list here from the ranch." Garrett approached the counter and set down a folded piece of paper. "Whatever you have of these items would be appreciated." Penelope took the paper without looking at him directly, keeping her face angled away. She read through the list quickly. I have everything except the molasses. Shipment did not come in last week. Should have it by Friday. That will be fine. No rush on that item. She moved through the store with practiced efficiency, gathering flour, coffee, dried beans, salt pork, and other staples. Garrett watched her, noting the way she moved, the way she kept her left side turned away from him. He saw the curtain of hair, the careful positioning. He was not a man given to prying, but he was observant. Something had happened to this woman, something that made her want to hide. When she returned with her arms full, he stepped forward to help. Let me take some of that, madam. I can manage. Her response was quick, almost sharp. I do not doubt it, but there is no sense in making one trip when two would be easier. His voice was gentle, with no hint of offense. Penelope hesitated, then allowed him to take several of the heavier items. They set everything on the counter together, and she began tallying the cost. Her handwriting in the ledger was neat and precise. Garrett found himself wanting to see her face, not out of morbid curiosity, but because something in her voice suggested a person he would like to know. That comes to $4.30, she said, still not looking at him. He counted out the money and placed it on the counter. Thank you kindly. I will be back Friday for that molasses. It will be here. Garrett gathered his purchases and loaded them into his saddlebags. As he worked, he noticed a broken step on the store's front porch. The wood had splintered and pulled away from the frame. It was an accident waiting to happen. He secured his supplies and then walked back to the door. Penelope had returned to her ledger, her face once again hidden. Madam, you have a broken step out front. If you have a hammer and some nails, I could fix that for you right quick. Would not want anyone taking a fall. She looked up, startled. That is not necessary. Maybe not, but it would be neighborly. I have a few minutes to spare. I cannot pay you for labor. I am not asking for payment, just being helpful. He smiled at her, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Tools in the back. Penelope found herself nodding despite her instinct to refuse. There is a toolbox in the storeroom, through that door. Garrett found the tools and got to work. The repair took perhaps 20 minutes. He removed the damaged board entirely, cut a new piece from a spare plank he found, and secured it properly. When he finished, he tested it with his full weight, nodding in satisfaction. He returned the tools and came back to the counter. All fixed, should hold for a good while now. Thank you. Penelope's voice was softer now, tinged with something that might have been surprise. That was kind of you. Just doing what is right, madam. I will see you Friday. He left before she could respond, settling his hat back on his head and mounting copper with easy grace. Penelope watched him ride away, a strange feeling stirring in her chest. It had been so long since anyone had done something kind for her without pity in their eyes. But the cowboy had not looked at her with pity. He had barely looked at her at all, had not pushed to see what she was hiding. There had been only courtesy and competence in his manner. She touched the scar on her face, feeling the familiar ridge of damaged tissue. Then she returned to her ledger, trying to ignore the way her heart had quickened during the brief encounter. Friday came, and with it, Garrett Ellis. He arrived in the afternoon, once again tying copper outside and entering the store. This time Penelope was restocking shelves, standing on a small ladder to reach the higher spots. She heard the door and climbed down quickly, once again positioning herself with her left side away. Afternoon, madam. I have come for that molasses. Yes, it arrived yesterday. She retrieved the jar from the back and set it on the counter. 40 cents. He paid and took the jar but did not immediately leave. I noticed your rain barrel is leaking, west side of the building. I know. I have been meaning to address it. I could patch it if you like. Have some tar in my saddlebag that would do the job. Penelope hesitated. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Fixing things. Helping. You do not know me. Garrett considered the question seriously. I suppose I do it because I can, and because it seems like you could use a hand now and then. Running a store alone cannot be easy. I manage. I am sure you do, but managing alone is harder than managing with help. He studied her, or rather, studied the part of her she allowed him to see. No strings attached, madam, just neighborly conduct. Something in his tone, in the straightforward honesty of his words, made Penelope's defenses waver. The tar is in your saddlebag. Yes, madam. Then I suppose it would be wasteful not to use it. Garrett's face broke into a grin. My thinking exactly. He patched the rain barrel and refused the cookies she offered as payment, though he did accept a cup of water. Before he left, he mentioned that he would likely be back the following week for more supplies. Penelope found herself looking forward to it in a way that both pleased and frightened her. The pattern continued through the summer. Garrett came to town every week or two, sometimes with a list from the ranch, sometimes with errands of his own. He always stopped at Winters' general store. He fixed a loose shutter. He repaired a squeaky hinge on the door. He brought news from the surrounding area, sharing stories about life on the ranch in a way that required no response, but seemed to fill the quiet spaces of the store with warmth. Penelope began to anticipate his visits. She found herself listening for the sound of hoofbeats, watching the road through the window. She started to relax around him, though she never let him see the left side of her face fully. Garrett never pushed. He treated her with consistent respect and kindness, never staring, never asking invasive questions. One afternoon in August, he arrived to find the store closed in the middle of the day. This was unusual. He peered through the window and saw Penelope sitting on the floor behind the counter, her shoulders shaking. He tried the door and found it unlocked. "Madam, Miss Winters," he entered cautiously. "Are you all right?" Penelope looked up, and for the first time he saw her face fully. The scar was prominent, a thick line of white tissue that pulled at her skin. Her eyes were red from crying, and tears tracked down both cheeks. She gasped and immediately turned away, covering the scar with her hand. "Please leave," she said, her voice breaking. "Please just go." Garrett did not leave. He closed the door behind him and crossed to where she sat. He lowered himself to the floor beside her, keeping a respectful distance but making his presence known. "What happened?" "Nothing. Everything. I do not know." She kept her face turned away, her hand pressed against her scar. "Some children came in earlier. They stared and whispered, and one of them asked his mother why my face was so ugly. She shushed him, but she did not disagree. She did not say I was not ugly, because I am. I am hideous and ruined, and I should not even be seen in public. That is not true. You have not seen me, not really. I am seeing you right now. Then you understand." Her voice was bitter. "You understand why I hide." Garrett was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I understand that you were hurt. I understand that someone damaged you and that you carry the mark of it. But I do not understand why you think that makes you less than what you are. What I am is scarred. Yes, you are scarred, but you are also strong. You run this store alone. You keep it clean and organized. You serve your customers with efficiency and fairness. You survive despite what was done to you. That is strength, Miss Winters. That is something worth seeing." Penelope shook her head, still not looking at him. "You are just being kind. I am being honest." He shifted slightly, his voice becoming firmer. "May I tell you something? I have known men who were broken by far less than what you have endured. I have seen people give up and crumble when life dealt them a hard blow. But you did not crumble. You kept going. That takes courage." "I do not feel courageous. I feel ashamed." "Of what?" being the victim of violence. That shame belongs to the men who hurt you, not to you. She finally turned to look at him, her hand still partially covering the scar. Her eyes searched his face for disgust or pity. She found neither. Instead, she saw something that looked like respect, like genuine regard. "I cannot stand people seeing me," she whispered. "I cannot stand the stares and the whispers and the way they look away as if the sight of me is too much to bear." Garrett reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement so she could pull back if she wanted. She did not. His fingers gently circled her wrist, and slowly, carefully, he lowered her hand away from her face. She resisted at first, but his touch was patient and steady. "Let me see your strength," he said quietly. "Not your wound, your strength, the courage it takes to face each day, the determination that keeps you moving forward. That is what I want to see." Penelope's breath caught in her throat. Tears spilled over again, but these were different. These were tears of release, of something long held finally loosening its grip. Garrett lifted her chin with gentle fingers, making her meet his eyes. "You are not hideous. You are not ruined. You are a woman who survived something terrible and came out the other side. Do not let those children or their thoughtless mother or anyone else convince you otherwise." "How can you say that?" Her voice was barely audible. "You barely know me." "Then let me know you better. Let me prove to you that what I see when I look at you has nothing to do with a scar." They sat there on the floor of the general store, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, creating patterns of light and shadow. Something shifted between them in that moment, something profound and irreversible. Penelope felt as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff, and Garrett was offering his hand to help her step back to solid ground. "I do not know how to do that," she admitted. "I have been hiding for so long. Then maybe it is time to stop hiding, at least with me, just to start." She studied his face, this cowboy who had wandered into her life and begun fixing things without being asked. His face was honest and open, lined by sun and wind but strong in its features. His eyes were gray-blue, clear and direct. His hands, still gently holding her wrist, were calloused and capable. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Because I see something worth caring about, and because I know what it is to carry something heavy alone. Everyone needs help sometimes, Miss Winters, even the strong ones. Especially the strong ones." Penelope felt something crack open inside her, some wall she had built carefully over 2 years of isolation. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. "I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything right now. But maybe you could stop hiding that side of your face when I come around. Maybe you could let me see all of you, scar and all." She took a shaky breath and nodded slowly. "I can try. That is all anyone can ask." He smiled at her, that genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. "Now, how about I help you up off this floor and we get you a proper chair? Cannot be comfortable down here." Despite everything, Penelope laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but it was real. Garrett stood and offered her his hand. She took it and let him pull her to her feet. They stood close for a moment, hands still clasped, and something electric passed between them. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not running away." "I am not much of a runner," he replied. "More of a stander. I tend to stay where I am needed." "And you think you are needed here?" I think we both know the answer to that question. From that day forward, things changed between Penelope and Garrett. She stopped turning her face away when he entered the store. She met his eyes directly and let him see the scar without covering it. It was difficult at first, her instinct to hide screaming at her to turn away, but she fought it. And each time she did, Garrett's expression remained constant. Interested, engaged, but never pitying, never disgusted. He began stopping by the store more frequently, sometimes with no excuse beyond wanting to see her. They talked while she worked, conversations that ranged from mundane topics like the weather and the price of cattle to deeper subjects like loss and resilience, and what it meant to build a life in the harsh Dakota territory. Penelope learned that Garrett had lost his own family when he was 19. A fever had swept through their small farm in Kansas, taking his mother, father, and younger sister within a week. He had buried them alone and then sold the land, unable to bear staying in a place so full of ghosts. He had been drifting ever since, working ranches across the West, never quite settling. "You ever think about stopping?" she asked him one afternoon. "Finding a place to stay permanently, I think about it," he admitted. They were sitting on the front porch of the store, watching the sun lower toward the horizon. "But I never found a reason compelling enough, until maybe now." Penelope's heart skipped. "Now? Bismarck seems like a good town, good people, good opportunities." He looked at her directly. "Good reasons to stay." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "The ranch work is seasonal though, is it not?" "It is. But a man with skills can find work anywhere. I am handy with repairs, I know horses, I can do bookkeeping if needed. A town like this always needs capable hands." "That is true." She hesitated, then pushed forward. "The storeroom in the back could be converted into living quarters. It is quite large. I have been thinking about doing it for some time to avoid the long walk home each night. But the work is beyond my skills." Garrett turned to face her fully. "Are you offering me a job, Miss Winters?" "I am suggesting a possibility. If you were interested in permanent work, the store could use help. The stock is getting harder for me to manage alone, and there are always repairs needed. I could not pay much at first, but room and board would be included and a fair wage on top of that." She met his eyes steadily, her heart pounding. It would be honest work for an honest man. It would be. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "Is this offer just business, or is there something more you are hoping for?" Penelope's breath caught. This was the moment, the cliff's edge again. She could pull back, make it purely professional, protect herself, or she could step forward into the unknown. She thought about the past months, about how Garrett had slowly and patiently helped her emerge from her shell. She thought about how her heart lifted when she heard his horse approaching, how the store felt emptier when he left. "I think we both know there is something more," she said quietly. "But I do not know if that something is welcome. I do not know if a man like you could truly want a woman like me." "A woman like you," Garrett repeated. "You mean a woman who is strong and capable and kind. A woman who faces each day with courage even when it is hard. A woman who makes me want to stay in one place for the first time in 7 years." He reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and steady. "If that is what you mean by a woman like you, then yes, Miss Winters. A man like me could very much want that." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were entirely different from the ones she had shed on the floor of the store. "My name is Penelope. I think you should use it." "Penelope." He said it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. "That is a good name, strong. It is too formal." "Everyone has always called me Penny." "Penny." His smile widened. "I like that even better, and you should call me Garrett. None of this Mr. Business." "Garrett." She tested it, and it felt right in her mouth. "So does this mean you are accepting my offer?" "The job offer or the something more offer? Both, if you are willing." "I am very willing." He squeezed her hand gently. "Though I should tell you if we are courting, I intend to do it properly. I may be a drifting cowboy, but I was raised with certain standards." "Courting," Penelope repeated as if the word were foreign. "I never thought I would court anyone. After what happened, I believed that part of my life was over before it began. It was delayed, not ended. There is a difference." Garrett stood and pulled her to her feet. "Now, if I am going to be working here, I should take a proper look at that storeroom. see what needs doing to make it livable. They went inside together, and Garrett examined the space with a critical eye. The storeroom was indeed large, with a small window that let in decent light. It was currently filled with crates and barrels and various supplies, but the bones were good. "This could work nicely," he said. "I would need to build a partition to separate the living area from the storage. Add a proper bed, a stove for heat and cooking, some shelves. Maybe a month of work, doing it properly. Where would you stay in the meantime? I still have my room at the boarding house. Paid through the end of September. I could work here during the day and go back there at night until the space is ready. That seems reasonable." Penelope looked around the cluttered room, trying to imagine it transformed. "When could you start?" "I would need to give notice at the ranch. 2 weeks is customary, so I could start here in mid-September." "And the courting?" She felt bold asking, but also terrified. Garrett turned to face her, his expression serious. "The courting starts now if you are amenable. I would like to take you to dinner tomorrow evening. There is a decent restaurant near the hotel. Nothing fancy, but the food is good and honest. I have not been to a restaurant in 2 years." "Then it is past time you went." He stepped closer, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed the scar, and Penelope flinched involuntarily. He did not pull back. Instead, he traced the line of it gently, his touch feather light. "Does it hurt?" "No, not anymore. Only in cold weather sometimes." "Then why did you flinch?" "Habit, shame, fear of your reaction. My reaction is that it is part of you, part of your story. I do not love you less because of it." He paused, realizing what he had said. "I should not have said that word yet. Too soon." Penelope's heart was racing. "What word?" "You know what word. Say it anyway." Garrett cupped her face with both hands, one palm against her smooth right cheek, the other against her scarred left. "Love. I am falling in love with you, Penny Winters. Have been for months now, if I am honest. And a scar is not going to change that." She reached up and covered his hands with hers. "I am terrified. Of me. Of believing this is real, of letting myself hope, of what happens if you change your mind. I will not change my mind. I am a stubborn man. Ask anyone who has worked with me. Once I commit to something, I see it through." His thumbs stroked her cheeks gently. "I am committing to you, to this, to whatever we build together." Penelope rose on her toes and kissed him. It was tentative at first, uncertain, the kiss of someone who had forgotten how to be vulnerable. But Garrett responded with warmth and patience, his lips moving against hers with a tenderness that made her knees weak. When they parted, they were both breathing hard. "Yes," Penelope said. "Yes to dinner. Yes to courting. Yes to all of it. Good." Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "Because I was prepared to be very persistent if you said no." They stood together in the cluttered storeroom, the late afternoon sun filtering through the dusty window, and both felt as though they had found something they had not known they were searching for. The following evening, Garrett arrived at the store precisely at 6 o'clock, freshly washed and wearing his best shirt. Penelope had closed up early and changed into her one good dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She had left her hair down, no longer using it as a shield, though the urge to hide still tugged at her. They walked together to the restaurant, side by side but not touching. Bismarck's Main Street was busy with evening activity, people finishing their workdays, children playing in the dusty road. Penelope felt the familiar stares, heard the whispers that followed her. But Garrett walked beside her with his head high, his posture declaring that he was proud to be in her company. Something about his confidence bolstered her own. The restaurant was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasting meat. The proprietor, a stout German woman named Mrs. Hoffman, greeted them warmly. If she was surprised to see Penelope out for a social occasion, she hid it well. They sat at a corner table and Garrett ordered for them both, checking with Penelope first to ensure his choices met her approval. When the food came, it was simple but delicious. Roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread with butter. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily. Garrett told her stories about his years on the trail, about stampedes and river crossings and nights spent under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Penelope talked about growing up in the store, about her father's dreams for expansion, about the books she read to fill the lonely evenings. "I have always loved reading," she confessed. "When I was hiding, when I could not bear to face people, books were my escape. I could disappear into other worlds where my face did not matter." "What do you like to read?" "Everything. Novels, newspapers, catalogs, anything with words." She smiled slightly. "I know it is silly." "It is not silly at all. Reading is how we learn about the world beyond our own experience. My mother loved to read. She taught me before I ever went to school." His expression softened with memory. "She used to say that a person who could read could never truly be lost, because books would always show them the way home." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was." "I wish you could have met her. I think she would have liked you." "Because I read." "Because you are strong and kind and resilient." Those were the qualities she valued most. After dinner, they walked slowly back toward the store. The sun had set, and the sky was deepening into twilight. Stars were beginning to emerge, faint pinpricks of light against the darkening blue. "Thank you for dinner," Penelope said as they reached the store's front porch. "I enjoyed myself more than I have in a very long time." "Then we will have to do it again." Garrett took her hand, lifting it to his lips and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "May I call on you tomorrow, not for business, just to see you?" "I would like that." "Good. Then I will see you tomorrow." He tipped his hat and turned to leave, but Penelope caught his sleeve. "Garrett, wait." He turned back. "Yes." She stepped closer, rising on her toes again to kiss him. This kiss was more confident than the first, less tentative. Garrett wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer. They stood together on the porch, kissing in the gathering darkness, and Penelope felt something inside her unfurl like a flower finally receiving sun. When they parted, Garrett smiled down at her. "You are making it very hard for me to leave." "Then maybe you should not." "Propriety says I should, at least until we have courted a bit longer." He kissed her forehead. "But I appreciate the offer." "Tomorrow, Penny." "Tomorrow." She watched him walk away into the night, her fingers touching her lips where his had been. For the first time since the robbery, since her father's death, since the bullet that carved her face, Penelope Winters felt genuinely happy. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of joy and discovery. Garrett came to the store every day, spending hours there even though he was still working at the ranch. He helped Penelope with heavy lifting and difficult customers. He made her laugh with his stories and observations. He kissed her whenever they had a moment of privacy, and each kiss deepened the connection growing between them. The town began to notice. People saw Penelope emerging from her shell, saw the way the cowboy looked at her, and opinions were divided. Some were happy for her, glad to see her finding companionship after years of isolation. Others whispered that Garrett must have some ulterior motive, that no man would truly want a scarred woman unless there was something to gain. Penelope tried not to let the whispers bother her, but they stung nonetheless. One afternoon, a customer made a comment just loud enough for her to hear. "Must be after her money. What else would he see in that face?" Penelope's hand flew to her scar, the old instinct to hide surging back. But before she could fully retreat, Garrett appeared from the storeroom where he had been taking inventory. He had heard the comment. He approached the customer, a middle-aged man named Vernon, with a look that could freeze fire. "I suggest you apologize to Miss Winters." Vernon puffed up. I did not say anything that was not true. You said something cruel and unfounded. Miss Winters is a fine businesswoman and a kind person. If you cannot treat her with respect, you can take your business elsewhere. Now wait just a minute. I have been shopping here for years. Then you should know better than to insult the proprietor. Garrett's voice was steel. Apologize or leave. Vernon looked between them, saw the unwavering determination in Garrett's face, and deflated. I apologize, Miss Winters. That was unkind of me. Penelope nodded stiffly, not trusting her voice. Vernon paid for his purchases quickly and left. As soon as the door closed behind him, she turned to Garrett. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. Nobody speaks about you that way in my presence. People will always say things like that. Not if I have anything to say about it. He pulled her into an embrace, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. You are not your scar, Penny. You are so much more, and anyone who cannot see that is a fool. What if he tells people you threatened him? Then he tells people. I do not care what Vernon thinks or what anyone thinks. I only care what you think. She pulled back to look up at him. I think I am very lucky to have found you. The luck is mutual. He kissed the top of her head. Now, should we finish that inventory, or have I scared away all the customers for the day? She laughed despite the tears threatening to fall. Let us finish the inventory, and Garrett, thank you for defending me, for seeing me. Always. In mid-September, Garrett officially left the ranch and began working full-time at Winters' General Store. He threw himself into transforming the storeroom into living quarters, working long hours with saw and hammer. Penelope helped when she could, holding boards steady and passing him nails. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs, moving around each other with increasing familiarity. The partition went up first, creating a clear separation between storage and living space. Then came the bed frame, built sturdy and solid from pine. Garrett installed a small pot-bellied stove for heat and cooking. He built shelves and a simple wardrobe. Penelope contributed curtains for the window and a quilt she had been working on for years but never finished. As the space took shape, their relationship deepened. They had fallen into a comfortable routine, working side by side during the day, sharing meals, talking long into the evenings. Garrett still officially slept at the boarding house, but he often stayed late, the two of them sitting in the main store after closing, talking by lamplight. One such evening in early October, with the first hints of autumn chill in the air, Penelope asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. When you finish the room, when you officially move in here, people will talk. They will assume things. Let them assume. Garrett was whittling a piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced ease. We know the truth, but it matters. Reputation matters, especially for a business owner. He set down his whittling and looked at her seriously. What are you saying, Penny? I am saying that perhaps we should make our intentions clear, make things official. Are you asking what I think you are asking? She took a deep breath, her heart racing. I am saying that I love you, Garrett Ellis. I love you completely and without reservation. And if you feel the same way, then perhaps we should not wait any more. Garrett stood and crossed to where she sat. He knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. I do feel the same way. I love you, Penny Winters. I have loved you since the day I found you crying on the floor and you let me see your face. I have loved you through every conversation, every shared moment, every discovery of who you are beneath the surface. Then marry me, she said, her voice breaking. I know that is not how it usually works, that the man should ask, but I do not care about convention. I want to spend my life with you. I want to build something together. Will you marry me? Garrett laughed, a joyful sound that filled the store. I was going to ask you next week. I have been trying to find the perfect moment, the perfect words. But yes, Penny, Yes, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier. He pulled her down to the floor and kissed her deeply, both of them laughing and crying at once. When they finally broke apart, they sat together in the lamplight, foreheads touching, hands clasped. Should we have a long engagement? Garrett asked. Give you time to plan a wedding? No, I do not need a big wedding, I just need you. We could go to the justice of the peace tomorrow if you wanted. Tomorrow seems fast, even for me, he considered. How about next Saturday? That gives us a week to make arrangements, tell people, make it a bit more of an occasion. Next Saturday is perfect. They spent the next week in a flurry of preparation. Penelope closed the store one afternoon to visit the dressmaker, ordering a simple but beautiful dress in cream-colored silk. Garrett bought a new suit and had his boots polished. They arranged with the local minister to perform the ceremony in the small church at the edge of town. The news spread quickly through Bismarck. Reactions were mixed, as expected. Some people were genuinely happy for the couple. Others remained skeptical. But Penelope found that she cared less and less what others thought. She had found something real and precious, and no amount of gossip would tarnish that. On the Thursday before the wedding, an unexpected visitor arrived at the store. Penelope was behind the counter when the door opened to reveal a well-dressed woman in her 50s, her face vaguely familiar. It took Penelope a moment to place her. This was Sarah Miller, one of the women who had been shopping the day of the robbery, who had witnessed the shooting. Mrs. Miller, Penelope said, tensing. Can I help you? Sarah Miller approached the counter nervously. Miss Winters, I wanted to speak with you before your wedding. I wanted to say something I should have said 2 years ago. What is that? I am sorry. I am sorry for the way I treated you after the shooting. I am sorry for avoiding your store, for crossing the street when I saw you coming, for whispering with the other women instead of offering support. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. What happened to you was terrible, and instead of showing compassion, this town showed you cruelty. I showed you cruelty, and I have regretted it every day since. Penelope was stunned into silence. She had expected many things, but not this. Sarah continued. When I heard you were getting married, heard how that young man stood up for you and looks at you like you are the most precious thing in the world, it made me realize how wrong we have all been. You deserved that kind of loyalty and love from all of us, not just from him. So I wanted to apologize and to ask if you might allow me to attend your wedding. I would like to support you the way I should have from the beginning. Penelope felt tears welling up. Mrs. Miller, I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. Sarah placed a small wrapped package on the counter. This is a wedding gift, just a little something for your new life. I hope you will accept it. Thank you. Penelope's voice was thick with emotion. And yes, I would be honored to have you at the wedding. Sarah smiled, relief washing over her face. Thank you, my dear. I will see you Saturday. After she left, Penelope opened the package to find a beautiful embroidered table runner. The stitching was exquisite, clearly hours of careful work. Attached was a note, for your new home. May it be filled with love and happiness. With sincere apologies and best wishes, Sarah Miller. When Garrett arrived that evening, Penelope told him about the visit. He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. People can change. And your courage has helped them see things differently. By refusing to keep hiding, by living your life openly, you are teaching this town something important. What is that? That scars are just scars. They are not the whole story. The real story is what you do after you are wounded. Saturday dawned clear and bright, the autumn sun warming the crisp air. Penelope woke early in her small room above the store, the cream-colored dress hanging ready. She bathed carefully and dressed, her hands shaking slightly with nerves and excitement. There was a knock at the door, and when she answered, she found a group of women on her doorstep. Sarah Miller was there, along with several others, including Mrs. Hoffman from the restaurant and the dressmaker who had made her wedding dress. "We thought you might like some help getting ready," Sarah said. Every bride should have attendants. Penelope felt overwhelmed. These were women she barely knew, women who had avoided her for years. But here they were, offering kindness when she needed it most. "Yes, please. I would appreciate that very much." They came in and took over, helping with her hair, adjusting her dress, adding small touches like a ribbon or a borrowed necklace. They chattered and laughed, filling the usually quiet space with warmth and community. By the time they finished, Penelope looked in the mirror and saw not a scarred woman but a bride. The scar was still there, still visible, but it no longer defined her reflection. "You look beautiful," Sarah said softly. "That young man is very lucky." "I am the lucky one," Penelope replied. They walked together to the church, a small procession of women escorting the bride. When they arrived, Penelope was amazed to see how many people had gathered. The church was nearly full, far more than she had expected. People from all over Bismarck had come to witness the wedding. And there, at the front of the church, stood Garrett. He wore his new suit with quiet dignity, but his face lit up like a sunrise when he saw her. His eyes never left her as she walked down the aisle, and the love she saw there erased any remaining doubt or fear. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. The minister spoke about the nature of true love, about how it sees beyond surface appearances to the soul beneath. He talked about strength and resilience, about two people choosing to face life together. When it came time for vows, Garrett and Penelope spoke directly to each other, their voices clear and steady. "I promise to stand by you," Garrett said. "In good times and bad, in sickness and health. I promise to see you, all of you, every day. I promise to build a life with you that honors the strength you have shown and the courage you possess." "I promise to trust you," Penelope responded. "To let you see me, truly see me without fear or shame. I promise to build a home with you, a life with you, a future with you. I promise to love you with everything I am." They exchanged simple gold bands, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed her thoroughly, to the applause and cheers of the assembled crowd. Penelope laughed against his lips, joy bubbling up from deep within. The reception was held at the restaurant, with Mrs. Hoffman providing food and drink for everyone. It became a true community celebration, with people who had never spoken to Penelope before coming to congratulate her and offer their best wishes. The whispers were still there, but they were drowned out by genuine warmth. As evening fell and the celebration began to wind down, Garrett and Penelope slipped away. They walked hand in hand back to the store, to their new home. The living quarters Garrett had built were waiting for them, cozy and private. Once inside, Garrett pulled Penelope close, cupping her face with both hands. "Hello, wife. Hello, husband." She smiled up at him, this man who had seen her strength when she could not see it herself. "I love you." "I love you too. So very much." They came together in a kiss that held all the promise of their future, all the depth of feeling they carried for each other. The scar on Penelope's face no longer mattered. It was simply part of her story, part of the journey that had led her to this moment, to this man, to this new beginning. Their first year of marriage was filled with both challenges and joys. Running the store together proved to be rewarding work. Garrett's strength made the physical labor easier, and his friendly nature drew in customers who might have avoided the store before. Penelope's organizational skills and business acumen complemented his practical approach perfectly. They expanded the store's offerings, adding hardware and tools that Garrett knew ranchers and cowboys would need. Business grew steadily. The store became known not just as a place to buy goods, but as a place where customers were treated fairly and with respect, regardless of who they were or what they looked like. In the evenings, they would close up shop and retreat to their living quarters. Garrett taught Penelope to play the harmonica, though she never quite got the hang of it, which made them both laugh. She read to him from the novels she loved, and they discussed the stories late into the night. On Sundays, they attended church together, and Penelope found herself slowly becoming part of the community again. The nightmares came sometimes, dreams of the robbery and the gunfire. Penelope would wake gasping, her hand flying to her face. But Garrett was always there, pulling her close, reminding her she was safe. He never made her feel weak for her fear, never suggested she should simply get over it. He understood that healing was not linear, that some wounds took years to fully mend. In the spring of 1883, Penelope realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with both elation and terror. She worried about passing on her trauma to a child, about being a good mother despite her scars, both physical and emotional. Garrett listened to her fears and then held her close. "You will be an amazing mother," he said firmly. "Because you know what it is to suffer, you will teach our child compassion. Because you know what it is to be strong, you will teach our child resilience. And because you know what it is to be loved despite imperfections, you will teach our child acceptance. What if the child is frightened by my face? Our child will never be frightened by you. They will grow up seeing you every day, and your face will mean safety and love and home. The scar will just be part of who Mama is." His certainty helped calm her fears. As her pregnancy progressed, Penelope found herself excited about the future in a way she had never been before. She and Garrett painted the small second room in their quarters, preparing it as a nursery. They chose yellow, a cheerful color that would work for either a boy or a girl. The women of Bismarck, led by Sarah Miller, threw a celebration for the coming baby. They brought gifts they had made, tiny clothes, soft blankets, knitted booties. They offered advice and support, folding Penelope into their circle in a way that still sometimes surprised her. The community that had once shunned her now embraced her, and while the change sometimes felt overwhelming, it also felt like a kind of redemption. In November of 1883, Penelope gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, but Garrett stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. When their son finally arrived, wailing lustily, Penelope felt a wave of love so powerful it took her breath away. They named him Samuel, after her father. He had Garrett's gray-blue eyes and Penelope's dark hair. He was perfect in every way. "Look at him," Garrett whispered, cradling his son with careful reverence. "He is beautiful." "He is," Penelope agreed, watching her husband with their child. "We made something beautiful together." Samuel grew quickly, a happy baby who smiled easily and rarely fussed. True to Garrett's prediction, he showed no fear or confusion about his mother's scar. Her face was simply her face, the face that fed him and sang to him and looked down at him with infinite love. Running the store with a baby proved challenging, but they managed. Garrett built a cradle that they kept behind the counter so Samuel could be close while they worked. Customers cooed over him, and business actually increased as people stopped by just to see the baby. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The years passed, marked by Samuel's growth and development. He took his first steps in the store, reaching for a can on a low shelf. He spoke his first word, which was "Papa," much to Garrett's delight and Penelope's mock indignation. He grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy who loved helping in the store, standing on a stool to reach the counter. In 1886, Penelope became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1887, she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Ruth, after Garrett's mother. She was small and delicate, with her mother's features and her father's coloring. Samuel, now 3.5, was enchanted by his baby sister. The store continued to prosper. They hired a part-time assistant, a young man named Thomas who proved reliable and hardworking. This allowed Garrett and Penelope more time with their growing family. They bought a small house on the edge of town, with room for the children to play and a garden where Penelope grew vegetables. But they kept the store, of course. It remained the heart of their livelihood and, in many ways, the heart of their story. The living quarters became Thomas's accommodation, and every day Garrett and Penelope would walk to work together, their children in tow. Samuel started school in 1888, and he thrived there, making friends easily and showing his mother's aptitude for reading. He never mentioned his mother's scar, never seemed to notice when other children stared. When one boy said something cruel, Samuel simply stated, "That is my mama, and she is brave and strong," and the matter was settled. Ruth grew into a bright, curious child who asked endless questions about everything. She loved the store almost as much as Samuel did, and both children became familiar fixtures behind the counter, learning the business from the ground up. In the summer of 1890, Bismarck celebrated the admission of North Dakota to the Union. The town threw a massive celebration, with speeches and dancing and fireworks. The Ellis family attended together, and as they watched the fireworks burst across the night sky, Penelope leaned against Garrett's shoulder. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked quietly. "When you first rode into town 8 years ago, imagine what? Being this happy, having this family? No, I did not imagine it. I hoped for something like it someday, but I never knew it would feel like this." "Like what?" "Like coming home after years of wandering. Like finding the place I was always meant to be." Penelope turned to kiss him, mindful of the children playing nearby. "I feel the same way. You gave me my life back, Garrett. You taught me to stop hiding. You did that yourself. I just reminded you of what was already there." He pulled her closer. "Your strength was always yours, Penny. I just helped you see it." They stood together watching the fireworks, their children laughing and pointing at the colorful explosions. Around them, the community they had become part of celebrated. And Penelope felt, perhaps for the first time in her life, completely at peace. Years continued to pass in a blur of ordinary moments that added up to an extraordinary life. Samuel grew tall and strong, taking after his father in build and temperament. He graduated from school with high marks and announced his intention to attend university in the East, to study engineering. Penelope worried about him being so far away, but Garrett reminded her that they had raised him to be independent and capable. Ruth proved to be a natural businesswoman, with her mother's head for numbers and her father's way with people. When she was 15, she began keeping the store's books, finding ways to increase efficiency and profit. She had no interest in leaving Bismarck, declaring that she intended to take over the store eventually. The community of Bismarck continued to grow and modernize. Electric lights came to the main street. The railroad expanded. New businesses opened. Through it all, Winters' General Store remained a constant, now operated by 3 generations: Penelope and Garrett, with Ruth increasingly taking on responsibilities. In 1898, on their 16th wedding anniversary, Garrett took Penelope on a trip. They traveled by train to Chicago, something neither of them had ever done. They stayed in a hotel, visited museums, saw a theatrical performance. It was a second honeymoon, a chance to remember who they were beyond parents and shopkeepers. One evening, as they walked along the lakeshore, Penelope touched her scar thoughtfully. It had faded over the years, becoming less angry, more a part of her natural landscape. She rarely thought about it anymore. You remember the day you found me crying on the floor? She asked. Every detail. It was the day everything changed. You told me to let you see my strength. Do you remember that? Of course. I think about those words often. They saved me in a way. They gave me permission to be more than my wound. Garrett stopped walking and turned to face her. At 42, he was still handsome, his face more lined but his eyes as clear and honest as ever. You were always more than your wound. I just made sure you knew it. We have built a good life, have we not? The best life. Better than I ever dreamed possible. They kissed there on the lakeshore, two middle-aged people still deeply in love, still choosing each other every single day. When they returned to Bismarck, they did so with renewed energy and appreciation for what they had built together. In 1900, Samuel returned home from university with a degree and a fiancée, a bright young woman named Clara. They married in the same church where Penelope and Garrett had wed, and the celebration was even larger. Samuel took a position with the railroad, designing bridges and rail lines. He and Clara settled in Fargo, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to build their own life. Ruth, at 18, took full control of the store's operations, with her parents serving as advisors and support. She modernized the inventory system and expanded into mail-order sales, bringing the store into the new century with confidence and skill. She had inherited her mother's resilience and her father's warmth, and customers loved doing business with her. In 1903, Samuel and Clara made Garrett and Penelope grandparents for the first time. The baby boy, named Garrett Samuel, was perfect and healthy. Holding him for the first time, Penelope marveled at how life moved in cycles, how joy could be found in unexpected places, how love multiplied rather than divided. Ruth married in 1905 to a teacher named William who treated her as an equal partner and supported her business ambitions. They lived above the store, in the same quarters where Penelope and Garrett had started their married life. History repeating, but in the best possible way. As Garrett and Penelope moved into their 50s, they gradually stepped back from daily operations of the store. They had earned their rest, had built something lasting and good. They spent their time traveling occasionally, visiting Samuel in Fargo, spoiling their growing number of grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. They bought rocking chairs for their front porch, and on summer evenings they would sit together watching the sunset, holding hands, talking about everything and nothing. Penelope's scar had faded to a thin white line, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. But even if it had remained angry and red, it would not have mattered. Garrett still looked at her with the same love he had shown that first day when he asked to see her strength. In 1910, Bismarck celebrated its 25th anniversary as the state capital. The town had grown from a rough frontier settlement into a thriving small city. The Ellis family was honored at the celebration for their contributions to the community over the years. Penelope stood on the stage with Garrett beside her, their children and grandchildren in the audience, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the life she had been given. She gave a short speech, talking about resilience and community and the importance of seeing beyond surfaces. She touched her scar as she spoke, no longer hiding it but claiming it as part of her story. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People who had once whispered about her now stood to honor her courage. That night, lying in bed beside Garrett, she reflected on how far she had come from the broken young woman hiding behind a curtain of hair. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. Garrett, half asleep, murmured, "For what?" "For seeing me when I could not see myself. For lifting my chin and asking to see my strength. For loving me." He turned to face her, more awake now. Penny, loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. You are the best decision I ever made. Even after all these years, especially after all these years, I know you now. All of you. Every scar, every fear, every strength, every joy. And I love every single piece. They held each other in the darkness. Two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful from pain and hope. The years continued to unfold gently. More grandchildren arrived. Ruth and William had 3 daughters who all inherited their mother's business sense. Samuel and Clara had 2 more children, a girl and a boy. The Ellis family tree grew and flourished. In 1918, the world was at war, and even Bismarck felt the effects. Samuel's oldest son enlisted despite his father's concerns. Letters came from overseas, and the family prayed for his safe return. When peace finally came in November, their prayers were answered. Young Garrett came home changed but whole, and the family celebrated with tears and thanksgiving. Garrett and Penelope moved into their 60s, their bodies slowing but their minds still sharp. They were beloved figures in Bismarck, the couple who had built a store and a family and a legacy of kindness. Young people who had never known the rough frontier days heard stories about the scarred woman who had hidden her face and the cowboy who had taught her to be brave. In the summer of 1925, they celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary. The entire family gathered at their home, now crowded with children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. There was food and laughter and music. Samuel played the guitar while Ruth's daughters sang. The youngest great-grandchild, barely walking, toddled between the adults, spreading joy. As the sun set and the party wound down, Garrett and Penelope found themselves alone on the porch, watching the last of the light fade from the sky. They sat in their rocking chairs, hands clasped between them, comfortable in the silence. 43 years, Penelope said softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like forever. Both are true, Garrett replied. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, but his eyes still held that same clear honesty that had first drawn her to him. Every day with you has been both a moment and an eternity. Do you have any regrets? Not a single one. You. Penelope thought about the girl she had been, hiding behind her hair, convinced her life was over. She thought about the bullet that had carved her face and killed her father. She thought about the years of pain and isolation. And then she thought about everything that had come after. Garrett's love, their children, their grandchildren, the life they had built together. No regrets, she said firmly. Not even the scar, because without it I might never have learned what I was capable of. I might never have met you. Everything that happened, even the terrible things, led me here, led me to this life. How could I regret that? Garrett lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. You are remarkable, Penny Ellis. You always have been. We are remarkable together. That we are. They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Inside the house, their family laughed and talked, the sound drifting out through the open windows. This was the life they had built, full of love and legacy and the quiet certainty that they had chosen well all those years ago. Garrett and Penelope lived for many more years, watching their family continue to grow, watching Bismarck transform from a frontier town into a modern city. The store remained in the family, passed down through Ruth's daughters, each generation maintaining the values of fairness and kindness that Penelope and Garrett had established. When Garrett passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79 in 1932, Penelope grieved deeply, but without bitterness. They had been given 48 years together, 48 years of love and partnership and mutual respect. She held his hand as he took his last breath, and she whispered the words he had said to her so long ago. "I see your strength." Penelope lived for 3 more years, surrounded by her family, telling stories about the old days, about the wild frontier and the cowboy who had ridden into her life and changed everything. She passed away in the spring of 1935, at the age of 74, with her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed. Her last words were about Garrett, about how he had lifted her chin and asked to see her strength, about how that single moment had saved her life and given her everything she had ever needed. They buried her next to Garrett in the Bismarck Cemetery, under a cottonwood tree that provided shade in summer and stood bare in winter. Their headstone was simple but meaningful: Garrett Ellis, 1853, 1932, Penelope Winters Ellis, 1860–1935. Together they built a life of love and strength. The store continued for decades after their deaths, a lasting monument to what they had created. The scar that had once defined Penelope's life became, in the family stories, a symbol not of tragedy but of transformation, of the strength that can emerge from suffering, of the love that sees beyond surface wounds to the soul beneath. And in Bismarck, North Dakota, for generations after, people told the story of the scarred woman who hid her face and the cowboy who lifted her chin and said, "Let me see your strength." It became a reminder that healing is possible, that love can transform, and that sometimes the wounds we carry become the foundations for the most beautiful parts of our lives. The legacy of Penelope and Garrett Ellis lived on in their descendants, in the store that bore the family name, in the values of compassion and resilience they had modeled. They had taken pain and isolation and transformed it into connection and joy. They had taken fear and turned it into courage. They had taken a bullet scar and made it part of a love story that would be remembered long after they were gone. In the end, that was their true strength. Not that they avoided hardship, but that they faced it together, choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. And in doing so, they built something that lasted far beyond their own years, a testament to what is possible when two people see each other truly and love each other completely, scars and all.